What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here with a preview for Week 3 of the NFL season. I'm actually a day later than normal because I tried to record this video last night. I did 20 minutes and realized that I wasn't recording the audio. So I went to bed and gave it another shot today. So hopefully this one works and we don't run into any issues. So it's Week 3 of the NFL. We don't have much data to work with, but we have a little bit of data. So having a little bit of a sample size is better than no sample size at all. So we will be referencing some of my tools, and we will be referencing some data that we have already for the first 2 weeks of the season. We'll go through this like we do every single week. We'll start with quarterback, and we'll go through each position about who might be the most interesting plays across the board. So the quarterback position, if you've followed along over the last couple of years, you'll realize that I'm probably the type of guy who pays up for quarterback more often than not. This week, I'm not particularly thrilled with the options that we have here. So the top 4 quarterbacks, none are really in great situations. You know, we know Drew Brees has struggled on the road over the course of the last couple of years. There's a big difference between him at home and on the road. Now he has to face a Carolina defense that has allowed the fewest DraftKings points to opposing quarterbacks over the course of the last 2 weeks. Tom Brady in a tough spot. Matt Ryan, not a great matchup again. So Aaron Rodgers at home against a middle-of-the-road Cincinnati defense is probably my favorite play here, but I'm going to be focusing the majority of my attention probably in the middle of this quarterback range. All right, let's flip over to my cheat sheet here real quick. So this is the cheat sheet for Week 3. This is available on dfsondemand.com. And what you'll notice this week is I actually have player scores in here. So this is an attempt a little bit to get away from player projections. So in many sports, so I love projections for the NBA. Long story short, we just don't have enough data. We don't have a big enough sample size for them to be too accurate for the NFL. So I actually like to use a player score. It's 0 to 100. 100 is the best possible play. 50 is average. 0 is the worst possible play. You'll see these are a little wonky. Not wonky, but they're very volatile. They're very extreme, especially with the running backs and the wide receivers. Those will normalize as we get more data, but they're pretty good here for quarterbacks so far through Week 2. So you'll see Aaron Rodgers, the top-ranked quarterback, which we talked about, but then we have a couple other options here. Carson Wentz checks in just below Aaron Rodgers, and he's only 5,900 against the New York Giants. So to talk about why the score is so high for a guy like Carson Wentz, the score is so high for a guy like Dak Prescott and Phillip Rivers when they're not nearly as expensive as Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. At this point in the season, it's mostly volume. These calculations take into account recent performance, pass attempts, pass yards, defense that they're playing, a lot of different factors. But right now, through 2 weeks, a lot of these are volume based. So what you get out of Carson Wentz is, let's see if I can do this real quick. 85 pass attempts, which is the second most in the NFL. I'm sorry, the third most in the NFL behind just Dak Prescott and Aaron Rodgers. So when you have the type of opportunity that you're getting from Aaron Rodgers, from Dak Prescott, Carson Wentz, you can see why these guys quickly become value plays. I will probably be focusing a lot of my attention on Phillip Rivers this week, so I'll hop back and forth here. Phillip Rivers at $6,400, coming off 18 DraftKings points and 20 DraftKings points in the first 2 weeks of the year. Gets to face a Kansas City defense at home. Kansas City just gave up 28 DraftKings points to Carson Wentz last week. But what really stands out about Phillip Rivers is his quarterback rating. 106 rating through 2 games. Very efficient last week. 31 of 39 for 331 yards. These are all very good signs. This game has, I think, the 3rd or 4th highest total on board. It's a close line, so you can expect Phillip Rivers to go out there, throw it 35 or 40 times in this game. And if he has the same type of efficiency numbers, I think he has a pretty high upside this week against Kansas City. A few other guys here. So Derek Carr at $6,800. All the weapons that this guy has, This Oakland-Washington game has a total of 54 points, and Oakland is only a 3-point favorite. Vegas indicating a lot of points are going to be scored in this one. Derek Carr probably a pretty significant beneficiary of that. Another guy completing a lot of his passes. He threw 3 touchdowns last week, all to Michael Crabtree. He has the weapons to be a top 5 scoring quarterback this week. Price to move at 6,800. And then not Jay Cutler. Wow, looking at the wrong guy. Matt Stafford. So, the week 1 darling against Arizona gets a much different matchup against the Giants in week 2. Still throws for 2 touchdown passes, but only has to drop back 21 times. This was never really a contest on Monday night last week. This week, he's going to have to throw it a bit. Okay, so this Atlanta game, a 50.5 point total. The Lions are just 3-point dogs, so that is the second highest total on board. Matt Stafford, I prefer at home. And I think we're going to see closer to 41 pass attempts than we are 21 pass attempts in a game that could very easily turn into a shootout between these two offenses. So $6,200 for a guy who literally could be the number 1 scoring fantasy quarterback. He did it in week 1. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility for him to back that up and be the highest scoring quarterback again this week. So you can see why I'm a little hesitant to pay up for these top 4 guys when we have probably 4 solid options here in the middle of the price range that are going to be $1,000 cheaper. If you're really desperate, I guess Carson Wentz is still in play, just the sheer volume of pass attempts, but that New York Giants defense probably going to be the stiffest task that he has faced so far this year. Down here, Trevor Siemian, I think that's a little bit of fool's gold. I like him other weeks moving forward, but again, on the road at Buffalo is probably not a great place to be. So I don't think you have to go for too much value here because there are so many middle-of-the-road options. I think you can really take your pick and probably be happy with a lot of the results. All right, let's flip this to running backs. The top 2 guys, really interesting options here. Le'Veon Bell, through 2 weeks of the season, has been an utter disappointment. Let's face the facts, right? 20 combined DraftKings points in 2 weeks is not what you're looking at from Le'Veon Bell. You're looking at 20 points a week from this guy. But there are signs of life, okay? 27 rush attempts, 4 receptions last week is 31 touches. That is exactly the type of volume that you're looking for when you pay up for Le'Veon Bell. Now, it was a tough matchup. That Minnesota defense is pretty stout. He still gets 87 yards on the ground, doesn't do much through the air, racks up 13 DraftKings points. Through 2 weeks of the season, and through however many touches this has been, Le'Veon Bell has scored basically the lowest possible DraftKings points you could ever imagine. If you've simulated this season 100 times, this is probably the worst that Le'Veon Bell ever gets. Now you get an $8,800 discount. Or I'm sorry, you get a $1,000 discount down to $8,800. So you're looking at a guy who was $1,000 more expensive last week, who got 31 touches last week, who is now going to face a Chicago defense that the Bucs blew out 7 days ago. So here's a really good option to buy on Le'Veon Bell when you now assume there's going to be, he's probably going to touch the ball 30 times. And I will take him at $8,800, touching the ball 30 times against anyone in the world. Ezekiel Elliott, another interesting option, right? So what's the saying? When there's blood on the streets, buy property. That's what we would be doing with Zeke this week, and I'm okay with this, right? If you're a glutton for punishment, if you can stomach it, it's bye week on Zeke. Here's kind of an opposite situation. Ezekiel Elliott rushes 9 times for 8 yards. Widely discussed on every sports media outlet for 7 straight days how terrible this was, how he gave up on his team, etc., etc. Not only does he do that, but he goes from $7,800 and now he's more expensive to $8,300. So you're looking at a guy who's more expensive, is coming off the worst possible game you could ever have, and now what do you do with him, right? When you can just probably pay $500 more and go get Le'Veon Bell, or you can go with Kareem Hunt, who's already scored, what, 5 or 6 touchdowns this year? So Ezekiel Elliott, probably the guy whose ownership just goes completely in the tank. Here's your GPP play. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Stand by. What you're looking at here are the NFL game logs for last year, also available on DFS on demand. We'll pull up Ezekiel Elliott. What I'm trying to show you, if I get out of the way, I want to show you the volume here, okay? So here's Zeke last year. Rushed the ball at least 20 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times in the, I think he only played 16 or 15 games last year because he didn't play in the final game. So essentially what we're looking at is a guy who is a lock to rush the ball 20 times, a bounce back game here. The Arizona defense, pretty poor against the rush. I just think this is a great opportunity to get him. Outside of that, you know how I feel about Jay Ajayi. I'm on him. I'm on him, okay? I'm going to like him basically every week. Kareem Hunt, this is probably the week that I'm not buying. I've had pretty significant shares of him the first 2 weeks. He's rewarded me and rewarded all of his owners with 5 touchdowns, but now you get this really significant price increase to the upper echelon of running backs, and he gets the worst matchup. So I think Hunt will be fine, but I think it's unlikely that he's the #1 scoring running back this week. And especially when you've got Le'Veon Bell for only $800 more, it's going to be difficult to buy on Kareem Hunt. Let me flip back to my cheat sheet here, and I want to sort this by running back touches. Whoops. Sorry, misclick. Because I think this is always interesting to look at. CJ Anderson at $5,800. I don't love the matchup with Buffalo, but how can you look past 49 touches in 2 weeks? 199 rush yards. He's only punched it in once, so he's actually kind of been a little bit disappointing. He's had like 5 carries inside the 5-yard line this year. He's converted on 1 of them. That's unusual, okay? It will be better than that. So I actually think CJ Anderson's upside is even higher. And then you have some of these guys where, you know, some of these make sense, like Leonard Fournette gets a ton of touches. We know Shady gets a ton. Here's an interesting one. Buck Allen. Let's see if we can pull him up here. Against a Jacksonville team. So this is what was really interesting to me last week, right here. 6 targets, caught 5 of them, 35 yards, added a touchdown. You know, that is, if that type of usage continues for a guy like Allen, which there's no reason to indicate it wouldn't. He's now had at least 20 touches or 19 touches in each of the first 2 games. That's a pretty good price for a guy who's only, you know, $5,000 getting 20 touches is pretty rare. Actually, we can see this. So guys who have averaged 20 touches would just be these guys here, 40 and up. So you're talking about Buck Allen and Lamar Miller, the only 2 guys priced at $5,000 who have accomplished that. So it's at least worth noting how much usage he's getting, even if it is kind of a dismal offense in Baltimore and a middle-of-the-road matchup with Jacksonville this week. And then the last guy I think we have to talk about is Carlos Hyde. And a lot of this is going to be matchup-based. Oh, actually, before I do that, Ty Montgomery in like every format is going to be so highly owned, but for very good reason. We'll talk about that more in a second. But here's Carlos Hyde at 5,200 against the LA Rams, who are essentially the worst offense through 2 weeks against running backs. He breaks off 15 rushes for 124 yards against the Seattle defense last week. This is that Carlos Hyde that has shown flashes before, where he breaks off 10 yards a carry, runs it, you know, gets every goal line touch, all that stuff. So this is an opportunity to ride the hot hand for only $5,200 in what's a pretty good matchup. Now, you have to remember, this is the Thursday game, so this is really only going to be those Thursday or those all-week slates that we're talking about here. Real quick, the Ty Montgomery thing, the way he's used in that Green Bay offense is so awesome because not only does he garner all the rush attempts, but he can be used as a receiver too. And the reason that he's interesting is, or even more interesting, is right here. So Jordy Nelson has been dealing with a little injury. Randall Cobb has been dealing with a little injury. Devontae Adams was, I actually think, day to day, maybe not. Maybe not Devontae Adams. But at least two of the Packers wide receivers may not be at full strength. If any of these guys is limited, if we find out that Randall Cobb is not going to play, that does open up Devontae Adams as a nice option. But either way, just from a sheer usage standpoint, Ty Montgomery's going to get his. So I think that he's very interesting. We'll go through some of these wide receivers here. Let's look at, who do I want to start with here? Let's start with Mike Evans. So remember, Mike Evans has only played one game this year. They did not play week 1. This is exactly what you expect from Mike Evans. 9 targets, he converts on 7 of them, 93 yards, and gets all the red zone looks, right? Like, when Jameis Winston is in trouble, I think it's when Winston is blitzed, he throws it to Mike Evans like 40% of the time. You know who's going to bring the pressure on Sunday? It's going to be Minnesota. And I imagine a scenario in which they toss this up to Mike Evans over and over and over again. The total's 43, which is not super high, but Minnesota's only a 1-point favorite here. It's not unreasonable to think that Mike Evans and Jameis Winston can move the ball through the air. Remember, this game against Chicago was a blowout. They didn't have to throw a ton. So Evans is really Jameis Winston's only option here. I will be rostering him until his price gets, even into the 9,000s. I think 7,500 is an absolute steal. Talked about Michael Crabtree last week, scored 3 touchdowns. Love Michael Crabtree long term. Actually, let's jump over to the cheat sheet here. And I actually want to sort this by targets. So, let's do wide receivers. Okay. 2 guys really lead the way here in targets. I know we're 2 weeks in, but 25 and 29 targets are pretty significantly more than the rest of the field. So we're looking at Des Bryant here. Dak hasn't really converted with him as much as I'd like. Obviously, only 9 catches on 25 targets. Same goes for DeAndre Hopkins, but you really can't avoid the level of usage here, right? So DeAndre Hopkins, 29 targets in 2 weeks. I think it's something like he said 40% of his team's targets both weeks. I think he's the only guy in the league to accomplish that. A matchup with New England. You got to believe New England as a 13.5-point favorite is going to put Houston in a ton of opportunities to throw the ball, right? They're going to be playing catch up for 3 quarters. So Hopkins, a pretty significant, even if it's just garbage time option. We have a team that is probably going to throw the ball 40 times, if not more, by necessity. And then DeAndre Hopkins is seeing the vast majority of those targets when the ball comes out of the hand of the quarterback. So from a sheer usage standpoint, you're probably not going to find anybody at $6,200 who can compete with these types of this type of usage. As we continue to go down here, talked about Devontae Adams. I think he's a good option. Emmanuel Sanders. Over the course of the last couple years in Denver, Demaryius Thomas has been the red zone option. We're not quite seeing that this year with Trevor Siemian. Again, only 2 weeks in, but Emmanuel Sanders getting a lot of red zone looks, and he's still cheaper. He's still under $6K. Like, I think there might be something here. I think he's worth investing on just in case this is a breakout season for Siemian and Sanders, and that's the combination that that really takes off, and maybe Demaryius Thomas's stock comes down a little bit. Let's buy now on Emmanuel Sanders before he gets too expensive and we're priced out. A couple of value plays here. So we talked a little bit about maybe some injuries in Green Bay, but let's talk about the Jacksonville situation real quick. Allen Robinson out, opens up a situation for Allen Hurns, who was 6 of 7 last week for 82 and a touchdown. Excellent week. He was a little limited at practice this week. We'll keep an eye on him. Jalen Strong actually got cut, didn't he? Did I read he got cut, or I just read it said that someone said they were giving up on him? Maybe I just assumed. Oh, I'm sorry. He was cut from Houston. Jacksonville signed him. Marquise Lee pops up here, so he didn't convert on a ton of these. 7 of 12, but 12 targets for a guy who's $4,400 is awesome, right? Like, this is great. So if you're looking for value plays at the wide receiver position, I think both of the Jacksonville guys are in play. And then what's to say about the tight end position? This is one that nearly every week is a disaster anyway. But this week you can see all the red all over this place. Gronk gets hobbled towards the end of last week. Greg Olsen on the IR. You've got questionable tags on Jordan Reed, on Jimmy Graham. Like this is a disaster zone. And it's already a very thin position. Travis Kelce is pretty interesting just because... One, I think it's very, very likely at the end of the week he's the number one scoring tight end, right? 17 targets over the course of the first 2 weeks. Has that great week last week to go 8 for 10, 100 yards and a touchdown. Like, that's awesome. I think it's very likely that he's the number one scoring tight end. But I also think he's low owned. And the reason for that is because there's a couple other value options here. So Zach Ertz, I talk about him all the time. Everyone's going to love him this week, okay? The Giants doing nothing to stop opposing tight ends. Zach Ertz he is the apple of Carson Wentz's eye. 18 targets in the first 2 weeks of the year, 93 and 97 DraftKings points. Still has not scored a touchdown, okay? There's more here. He's only $5,000. He scored 31 DraftKings points in 2 weeks, hasn't scored a touchdown. There's more coming, okay? There's higher scores coming than this. I think absolutely everyone owns Zach Ertz this week. It's not wrong. But if you want a little bit of a pivot, go look at Travis Kelce for $1,000 more. And then the price just has not moved on Jason Witten just enough yet. He's caught a touchdown pass in each of the first 2 weeks. Again, 22 targets. If I go back to this cheat sheet here and we still sort by targets and we look at tight ends, no shock to see who's at the top of the list. Jason Witten, 22 targets. He's caught 17 of them. Zach Ertz, 18. So, I mean, these are guys that are just seeing the vast majority of pass attempts from their respective quarterbacks. So, when you have Witten and you have Ertz as two really, really good options for $1,000 and $1,500 cheaper than Travis Kelce, you're probably going to see a lot of ownership go down to those two guys. Kelce, in a great spot. He's more expensive, but he could be the number one scoring tight end pretty easily. Okay, those are the only 3 guys I'm rostering at the tight end position. I'm happy to hear who you would like to roster. You can tweet me. It's at DFS On Demand, or leave a comment below. Looking forward to hearing from you guys, and best of luck this week.